Imran Khalid was the charming IT consultant neighbors trusted, and Amina Zahir was the soft-spoken newlywed who seemed to have it all, until 4 months into their marriage, secrets, betrayal, and a forbidden affair with the woman next door erupted into a murder that shocked the entire community. Amina Zahir had always believed in the power of patience. Raised in a conservative Muslim household in New Jersey, she was taught to trust the decisions of her elders and the guidance of her faith. When her parents introduced her to Imran Khalid through mutual family friends, she was initially hesitant, but ultimately agreed to the marriage, after several online meetings and reassurances from both families. Imran, a 32-year-old IT professional based in Ohio, was presented as respectful, well-settled, and ready for a lifelong partnership. He spoke with confidence, sent kind messages, and even quoted religious verses when discussing marriage. Amina, 28 and soft-spoken, saw the potential for love to grow over time. She packed her belongings, said goodbye to the familiar rhythms of her old life, and moved to Ohio with cautious optimism. Their wedding, held in a modest community center, was a blend of tradition and modern touches. Friends and family celebrated joyfully, and photos from the event painted a picture of happiness. Amina, in her embroidered bridal gown, shyly smiling next to her groom. Imran standing tall, proud of the life he was about to build. To anyone observing from the outside, it was the beginning of something beautiful. But reality, as Amina would soon learn, has a way of unmasking itself slowly and brutally. The first week passed peacefully. Imran took Amina to nearby parks, introduced her to a few colleagues, and even cooked dinner once or twice. But these sweet moments began to fade as quickly as they appeared. By the second week, Amina noticed small shifts in his demeanor. His phone was always on silent. He started stepping out during odd hours for what he claimed were urgent meetings or emergency work calls. He began criticizing her cooking, her accent, even the way she dressed. Despite her efforts to blend in and respect both his preferences and her values. The turning point came late one evening when Amina accidentally knocked over Imran's coffee mug while handing him his laptop. Without warning, he shoved her hand away, scowled, and stormed out of the room. The next day, he acted as if nothing happened. Confused and hurt, Amina told herself it must have been stress. He had work pressures after all. Maybe it wasn't personal. She had been taught to be patient, to give her husband the benefit of the doubt. But the cracks deepened. Within the first month, Imran's mood swings became sharper and more unpredictable. He returned home late most nights, refused to explain where he had been, and grew defensive if she asked. When she expressed concern, he accused her of being clingy and ungrateful. Soon he began yelling over the smallest things, if the rice was too soft, if she didn't answer his texts quickly, if she prayed too long. The emotional manipulation took its toll, and Amina found herself walking on eggshells in her own home. Despite the growing tension, Amina kept her struggles private. She didn't want to worry her parents, who had invested so much hope in this marriage. She thought maybe she just needed more time to adjust. Ohio was new. Marriage was new. Maybe Imran just needed space. But deep down, a quiet fear began to grow. It wasn't just emotional distance. It wasn't just the shouting. There were nights when Imran's rage turned physical. A sudden grip on her wrist, a shove against the wall, a bruise she had to hide beneath long sleeves. She avoided neighbors, ashamed of the life unraveling behind closed doors. No one in the neighborhood would have suspected anything was wrong. From the outside, their house looked like any other. A small, clean home on a quiet cul-de-sac, where lawns were trimmed and mailboxes had family names painted on them. But inside, Amina was shrinking by the day, and yet, amid all the confusion, she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. This wasn't just stress or culture clash. There was something Imran wasn't telling her. A pattern she couldn't yet define, but it was there. Lurking, dangerous, and growing stronger with each passing day. Leslie Grant had lived on Rosehill Lane for nearly 7 years. The 36-year-old divorcee was known around the neighborhood for her easy smile, love of gardening, and the constant presence of her golden retriever, Max. She lived just 3 houses down from Imran and Amina, and from the moment Amina arrived, Leslie took an interest. At first, it appeared harmless, just a friendly neighbor welcoming someone new. She dropped off a casserole one evening, waved from across the street, and complimented Amina's long embroidered shawl during a morning walk. Amina, who was trying to adjust to life in a new city with few familiar faces, smiled politely but remained cautious. Leslie's warmth felt genuine, yet there was something too eager about her curiosity. What Amina didn't know was that Leslie and Imran had a history. Their connection had started months before the wedding, when they first met outside the mailbox. A casual exchange turned into texting, which evolved into flirtation, and before long, Imran began visiting Leslie's home under the pretense of helping with tech problems. No one on the street paid much attention. They were both single at the time, or so they thought, and their interactions looked innocent enough. But what began as casual infatuation escalated quickly, especially after Leslie learned Imran was about to be married. Rather than pull away, she grew more involved, emboldened by secrecy. Imran never told Leslie the full truth. He claimed his upcoming marriage was pressured, that it was cultural, and that it wouldn't interfere with their relationship. He told her he didn't love Amina and was only doing it for appearances. These lies gave Leslie a sense of power. She believed she was the real woman in his life, and Amina was merely a formality. Their affair didn't pause after the wedding, it intensified. On days when Amina thought her husband was at work, Imran was often in Leslie's living room, sharing meals, whispering plans, and building a world that excluded his new wife entirely. As the weeks passed, Leslie's presence around the neighborhood became less subtle. She was often outside when Imran came or left, sometimes wearing bold outfits that made even the more laid-back neighbors raise an eyebrow. Amina began noticing Leslie's name flashing on Imran's phone screen and the sudden hush that followed. When she asked about it, Imran snapped that it was none of her business and accused her of being paranoid. The gaslighting made Amina question herself. Was she overreacting? Was she just homesick and misreading things? But patterns don't lie. Imran's absences grew longer, and his affection disappeared entirely. He avoided eye contact, no longer touched her hand when passing in the kitchen, and often slept on the couch, citing headaches or exhaustion. What Amina didn't know was that he was spending nights at Leslie's house, telling more lies and sinking deeper into a web of deceit that had no exit plan. The more Amina tried to reconnect, the more Imran distanced himself, coldly, aggressively, sometimes violently. His resentment toward her deepened with every lie he told. Her presence became a reminder of his guilt and a barrier to the fantasy life he was constructing with Leslie. Leslie, for her part, was not innocent in any of this. She encouraged Imran's frustrations with Amina, calling her naive and too traditional in private texts. She wanted Amina gone, not necessarily harmed, but removed from the picture entirely. Her manipulation was slow and intentional. She never directly told Imran to leave his wife, but she planted ideas, stoked his dissatisfaction, and made herself appear indispensable. Her tactics worked. Imran's behavior became increasingly erratic, and Amina's world grew smaller by the day. There were whispers among other neighbors, but no one intervened. Some assumed Imran was stressed. Others thought Leslie was just overly friendly. No one imagined the dark undertow pulling the situation toward something irreversible. Amina, isolated and bewildered, didn't know how close the danger truly was. She still hoped for a solution, unaware that her husband and the woman 3 doors down were crafting a secret so poisonous it would eventually consume them all. By the beginning of her 4th month in Ohio, Amina Zahir had become a quiet shadow in her own home. The vibrant young woman who once smiled at the possibilities of her new life now moved with caution, kept her voice low, and avoided eye contact whenever Imran was near. She had stopped calling her parents as frequently, afraid her trembling voice would give something away. The mask of a happy wife had begun to slip, but she wore it anyway, at least in public, where the illusion of normalcy mattered most. But behind closed doors, she was preparing, not to escape yet, but to understand what was happening around her with clarity and evidence. It began with a small leather journal, hidden in the back of a drawer, one she had brought from New Jersey without a clear purpose. Now, it became her lifeline. Amina started recording everything. Dates of arguments, descriptions of bruises, what he said, how long he was gone, even how many times she saw Leslie's car parked in a certain direction that hinted at overnight stays. She noted patterns. Imran was gone on Wednesdays longer than usual. He showered immediately when he returned from certain outings. Some nights his cologne smelled different, and his clothes carried the faint scent of lavender, not hers. These weren't just feelings anymore. They were facts. Then came the moment of confirmation. While folding laundry one afternoon, Amina found a folded receipt tucked inside the pocket of Imran's jeans. It was from a roadside motel just 15 minutes away, dated 2 days earlier, the same night he claimed to be working late due to an unexpected systems outage. Her heart dropped. She sat on the edge of the bed, reading it again and again, the printed date like a hammer pounding in her chest. There was no more room for doubt. This discovery unlocked something inside her. She started checking his phone when he left it unattended, carefully memorizing passwords and looking for clues without leaving digital footprints. What she found only deepened the pit in her stomach. Messages to Leslie, saved under a man's name, late-night photos, voice notes, and transactions for flowers and gifts she never received. The betrayal was deep. But even worse was the realization that Leslie knew about her and didn't care. In fact, in one message, Leslie mockingly referred to her as the house ghost. It was humiliating, heartbreaking, and terrifying all at once. The abuse at home escalated after this. Amina could tell Imran sensed her suspicion. He grew more controlling, started locking certain drawers, and snatched his phone away if she came near it. He demanded to know who she spoke to, criticized her for praying too much, and accused her of making him feel like a prisoner. He deflected his guilt by projecting blame. She was the problem. She wasn't adjusting. She wasn't a modern wife. He reminded her constantly that she had no friends here, no job, no family nearby. It was a silent threat wrapped in casual cruelty. Still, Amina pressed on quietly. She began researching shelters, saving hotline numbers under fake contact names, and reading stories online about women who had escaped abusive relationships. She considered calling the police once, but fear gripped her. Fear of not being believed, fear of backlash, fear of dishonoring her family. The shame that often silences victims lingered heavily over her, especially in a community where divorce was still seen as a last resort and abuse was often dismissed as private, domestic matter. In a moment of desperate clarity, Amina reached out anonymously to Leslie's ex-husband through a mutual connection she found on social media. It was a long shot, but she needed to know more about the woman who had invaded her marriage. The response came quickly, and it chilled her to the core. Leslie's ex warned her bluntly, "She's a manipulator. She enjoys ruining people. You're not the first." Amina's breath caught. The last puzzle piece had fallen into place. She now understood that she wasn't just being cheated on, she was being targeted, perhaps even set up. And the person she feared most might not be Imran alone anymore. The danger was now twofold, and time was quietly running out. It was a bitterly cold Friday night in February, when the quiet cul-de-sac of Rose Hill Lane was shattered by the sound of something breaking. Glass, maybe a dish, followed by a woman's piercing scream. Most of the neighbors assumed it was a movie playing too loud or a domestic argument that would soon fade into silence like all the others. But the screaming didn't stop. It rose, then dropped, then rose again. Raw, panicked, and unmistakably real. One neighbor, an elderly woman who lived across the street, hesitated for several minutes before finally calling 911. She would later tell authorities that she had a sinking feeling in her chest that something terrible was happening inside that house. When police arrived minutes later, they were met with a horrifying scene. The front door was slightly ajar, as if left open in a rushed escape. Inside, the house was in disarray. Furniture knocked over, a shattered picture frame near the entryway, and drops of blood leading into the kitchen. That's where they found Amina Zahir. She was lying on her back, lifeless on the cold tile floor. Her face was badly bruised, and a deep wound on the side of her head suggested the use of a blunt object. Blood had pooled around her, and near her body was a broken rolling pin, its wooden edges stained dark red. There were defensive wounds on her arms, signs that she had tried to shield herself. The struggle had been intense. Cabinet doors were swung open, a chair was overturned, and the scent of something burning lingered from the stovetop where dinner had been abandoned. Imran Khalik was nowhere to be found. Within the hour, police issued a bolo, "Be on the lookout," alert for Imran's vehicle, a black Honda Civic registered in his name. Surveillance cameras from nearby intersections showed his car speeding through traffic shortly after the estimated time of death. His phone was off, and calls went unanswered. But what officers didn't expect was how close he still was. Just 20 minutes after fleeing, Imran was spotted on a traffic camera pulling into a small roadside motel just off the interstate. Officers were dispatched, and within another hour, he was taken into custody without resistance. At the time of arrest, he appeared disheveled, his shirt stained and visibly shaken. In his possession was a plastic grocery bag containing bloodied clothing, a wiped cell phone, and a set of keys, some belonging to his home, others belonging to Leslie Grant. Investigators began piecing the timeline together. Forensics confirmed Amina had died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely delivered by the rolling pin found beside her. There were signs of strangulation as well, though not enough to cause death. The assault had been prolonged and violent. Autopsy reports later revealed multiple healed fractures from previous injuries, confirming what Amina had recorded in her journal: months of abuse that went unreported and unnoticed. Detectives searched Imran's digital records and found extensive communication between him and Leslie Grant. Their messages, hidden under an alias contact name, revealed the intensity of the affair, but more alarmingly, a pattern of growing resentment toward Amina. Imran had confided in Leslie about his frustrations, sometimes in chillingly detached language. He described Amina as dead weight, and in one disturbing message sent a week before the murder he wrote, "If she disappeared, everything would be easier." Despite this, Leslie claimed she had no knowledge of what Imran was planning. She denied involvement in the crime and said she hadn't seen him in person that night. But her alibi cracked under pressure. Security footage from her home's doorbell camera, later retrieved from cloud storage, showed Imran arriving at her front door less than an hour after the murder. He appeared panicked, his clothes stained, and he carried the same plastic bag found during his arrest. He only stayed a few minutes before leaving again. The discovery led to her being brought in for questioning, but no charges were filed. She maintained that she was scared and told him to leave, but the damage was already done. Her involvement, however indirect, had set into motion a tragedy no one could reverse. What began as infidelity and manipulation had now escalated into a brutal, irreversible act of violence. The image of a perfect suburban couple had been shattered, and the truth behind it revealed a darkness far more terrifying than anyone imagined. The trial of Imran Khalik began 8 months after the murder of Amina Zahir. By that time, the media had already seized on the tragedy, and the case had become a lightning rod for conversations about domestic abuse, cultural silence, and betrayal. Headlines described Amina as the obedient wife who never fought back, and Imran as the charming professional with a double life. The courtroom was packed on the first day, with members of both families, reporters, and dozens of strangers drawn by the horror of the crime and the unanswered questions it left behind. What could drive a man to kill the woman he married only 4 months earlier? Prosecutors presented a devastating case built on Amina's hidden journal, autopsy results, digital correspondence, and surveillance footage. They laid out the full extent of the abuse, how Imran manipulated, isolated, and physically harmed Amina over a span of months. Her journal entries were read aloud, and the courtroom sat in stunned silence as her own words detailed the fear she had lived with every single day. Her final entries, written just a week before her murder, included lines like, "He hates that I exist," and "I think he wants me gone." The prosecution also focused on the affair with Leslie Grant. They introduced text messages and images, painting a picture of an emotionally charged and dangerous relationship. Although Leslie denied any role in the killing, the evidence of her influence over Imran was undeniable. He had vented to her, plotted emotionally, and sought validation for his growing anger toward Amina. The jury saw how resentment and lust had merged into something lethal. Imran's defense team tried to argue diminished capacity. They suggested he had been under immense psychological pressure, torn between his family's expectations and a life he no longer wanted. They claimed Amina had become a symbol of that pressure and that he snapped during an argument that spiraled out of control, but this argument fell apart under the weight of the evidence, especially the cold, calculated way he tried to hide his crime, dispose of bloody clothes, and manipulate the timeline. The verdict was unanimous: guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Imran to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but even as the sentence was read, it felt like justice was incomplete. Amina's life had ended violently and alone, and no prison cell could reverse the trauma she had endured in silence. Her parents, sitting in the front row, wept quietly, not only for the daughter they lost, but for the pain she must have suffered without them knowing. In the aftermath, community leaders held vigils in Amina's honor. Her story was shared at domestic violence seminars and used in educational programs about the hidden signs of abuse. Many were struck by how invisible her suffering had been. She had been soft-spoken, respectful, and unwilling to complain. To those around her she appeared to be adjusting, but beneath that surface was a woman unraveling, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. Leslie Grant moved away shortly after the trial. Though she was never charged, her reputation was shattered. Her home was put up for sale, and she resigned from her job amid public backlash. In the court of public opinion she bore a deep stain, one not of legal guilt, but of moral complicity. Her silence, her encouragement, and her role in the emotional unraveling of Imran and Amina's marriage were not easily forgiven. For those who knew Amina, the grief was made worse by the possibilities that would never be. She had wanted to go back to school. She had spoken about volunteering at the mosque. She had dreams of having children and visiting her family more often. All those moments were stolen in one brutal act that took mere minutes, but left a lifetime of consequences. In the end, Amina became a symbol of how quietly abuse can thrive in the most ordinary places: a quiet house on a quiet street, a smiling couple, and a woman who never stopped believing that love could still be saved. Until it couldn't. Her story remains a haunting reminder that not all tragedies scream from the start. Some begin with silence, and sometimes silence is the loudest warning of all.